Welcome back to The Breakroom and on Inside Marvel. It turns out Nick Fury's line about having a wife in Captain America Winter Soldier wasn't just a girlfriend who lives in Canada, but a real-life wife who's a Skrull. But in honor of our classic Paul Dano thumbnail that turned into quite a meme from New Rockstars, does he know? Does he know?
What's he cooking?
Does he know what Thanos is cooking? Are we doomed for destruction? We are back in the Skrulls. This is Inside Marvel. It's New Rockstars Marvel Reaction Show. I'm Erik Voss. Here with me are the West Coast Avengers of New Rockstars, Hector Navarro and Maude Garrett. Hello.
I just want to point out to everybody watching at home, in the teleprompter here, it says Bruce Banter.
Oh, that's cute. Right now. It's been trademarked, though.
It's been trademarked, and you can't see it in the prompter,
right.
But it is in green in the Google document because this is when we just have our banter, and you know, it's like we're made for this. We're always happy.
Great to be back, everybody.
It's so good to be back with you guys.
So too.
I'm glad to be doing this live in person, and as you guys know, we're on the Breakroom channel now. This is going to be like all of our reactions are going to be. This is what the Breakroom's for. We're in the Breakroom right now. It's our new Breakroom set. And I'm so happy to be here with Maude and with Hector. I mean, just from Westeros Weekly, from WikiLeaks. You guys are my favorite people to talk about this stuff with. I'm super excited to have you here. Now, the Easter egg breakdown coming out on the main channel later today, maybe tomorrow. We're going to work as fast as we can to try to get it out to you guys. And Tommy and Jay's reactions episode, they did a live watch along. I don't know if it was live, but they watched it late night with like some of you crazies. That's when I was watching it. It's already out, so check that out. Be sure to subscribe to New Rockstars, subscribe to The Breakroom, and subscribe to The Deep Dive. All right, let's talk about what happened this episode.
Okay.
So, kicks off with the recap of the events of Captain Marvel, and it brings us to the year 1997, which is 2 years after the Captain Marvel film, where we see a younger Nick Fury. De-aging looked pretty good.
Yep.
Really good, can I say?
Yeah.
Like, that technology keeps getting better and better each time we see it.
And Marvel and Disney are like, we're going to keep using it.
Yeah,
Absolutely. We meet a young Gravik via a Skrull named Vara, and then Nick Fury senses something in this guy. That he's a survivor. He's a fighter.
He does initially go, he's a kid. I don't want to use him for this sort of war or this mission.
But we've also found out in the first episode that their aging is very different to Earth years.
That's
you know?
true.
So
That's
like this
true.
kid, he's probably like 30, fighting, ready to go, but he just looks like a kid.
They-
Very deceptive.
They mature to adulthood very quickly, and then they just kind of plateau for years and years and years.
Kind of
So
like
do I.
a baby Yoda, Grogu situation.
Uh-huh.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think humans, you know, they say even at 18, you're still a kid. I mean, I think even late 30s, you could still be a kid.
Yep.
I mean, welcome to New Rockstars. No, I'm kidding. We love
We have
this stuff.
toys behind us right now.
And I've already
up.
complained about them.
You
They're
had
not
a
the
go.
most accurate. Yeah, I'm like, no, that's not great.
So Talos makes a speech to this room full of Skrulls, offers them hope in the form of Nick Fury. Nick Fury and Carol Danvers have promised to find the Skrulls a new home in exchange for their help.
Yeah.
And we see Talos' wife Soren and the other adult Skrulls step up, take human forms as Gaia and Gravik watch on.
The little kids, so they've been it from day one.
That's right. And it sets up this deal that Nick Fury has made. I'm going to find you a new home, but I need you to help me
Like, what
secure.
grounds does he have to do it? Because he's Nick Fury, right?
Yeah.
I just it's like such a gargantuan task. I'm going to find you a new planet to colonize. It's basically like Carol's job because she can actually zip around and find uninhabited places.
Yeah.
But like me, one dude, can you help protect my entire planet in exchange for a new one as well?
I think it's a little bit of insight into Nick Fury's mindset at this time. So we know from the first Avengers movie and even further back to like the first Iron Man movie, you know, you become part of a bigger universe, Mr. Stark. I'm here to talk to you about the Avenger Initiative. Nick Fury is obsessed with making sure that the Earth is protected and having this Avenger Initiative, which we learn at the end of Captain Marvel. He calls it like the something else initiative, and then he backspace, Avenger, because that was the name of the plane on Carol Danvers'
Yeah, it was
plane.
her call sign.
Call sign. And it's a great, like, very catchy, very marketable word. So since the Captain Marvel movie, we've learned Nick Fury in 1995 became aware of alien life. And not just alien life, like threats potentially to Earth, the Kree, whatever.
When you look at sort of like what kind of threats you can have, people that can transform into another person.
Yeah.
You want them as an ally.
Absolutely. And so he's probably thinking, look, Carol bailed. She's out in space, and he's not going to hear from her, as far as we know, until he has to beeper her in 2019 when Thanos is attacking. So maybe he's thinking, okay, right now Earth is undefended. There's no other superpowered beings like Carol at least that he's aware of. And that kind of becomes Nick Fury's whole sort of modus operandi during the MCU, is that he's always kind of keeping tabs on superhuman powers, right? Tony Stark builds a suit of armor in a cave and flies out of there. And S.H.I.E.L.D. is like observing it because it becomes like, oh, he has like a lot of potential power.
Yeah.
They're keeping tabs on Bruce Banner for the 5 years that he's the Hulk and kind of running around and being a fugitive or whatever. So I think all of that's because Fury wants to make sure that these superpowered individuals are on his side.
Yes.
Skrulls are shapeshifters. They're enhanced humans. They're humans but more. Of course, he's going to use that as a resource while they're on Earth.
I think it's interesting that he did this enlisting before he created the real Avengers lineup.
Yeah.
Like he had for like at least a decade, like different Skrulls that he was using in a network. And I was like, how many people in S.H.I.E.L.D. have been Skrulls?
Makes you think there's got to be a bunch, because if he's the director of S.H.I.E.L.D. at some point, and in 1995, he's already working for S.H.I.E.L.D. with a young Coulson, and they're kind of coming up in the ranks, and he's been working at S.H.I.E.L.D. for 6 years or something is what he says. There's got to be a bunch of S.H.I.E.L.D. agents that
integrated into
Skrulls.
it.
That's what I'm saying. Laura Barton, I think she could be a Skrull.
And I think Nick wants those who are allied with him specifically that he can call on.
Maybe just in case S.H.I.E.L.D. goes down.
That's it.
Which happens in the Marvel Cinematic Universe.
It's kind of like Martin Sheen's character in The Departed. Like only he has a list of people who are out there who are like working the field, and no one there. Otherwise, they have no identity. It puts them in an incredible position of power over them.
Fun fact: the Rat in The Departed is the same Rat actor in Avengers Endgame.
Yeah, that Rat.
Once a rat,
Mickey Mouse.
It's Mickey Mouse. That's right.
Also, I think that Nick Fury deals with, how can I have people that are allied with me specifically? And I think because it's bigger than Earth, it's not on his payroll. It's on his currency, his promises. I will give you something. You know what I mean? So I think that he is absolutely biting off more than he can chew. And I think that that's what's explored in this episode.
Yep. Agreed. We're thrust back into the immediate aftermath of the bombing. Disguised Talos throws Fury into the van, leaving Hill's body behind.
Confirmed she died.
They can't even extract her body out of there. That has to be a big deal with brokered by Rhodey. But on the train, Fury and Talos play this game. I love this scene. Tell me something I don't know. Such a well-written scene. We learned that there are more than just a dozen or so Skrulls on Earth. That, as previously suspected, there are 1 million Skrulls on Earth.
And that changes everything, doesn't it? It changes the scale of this. Has gone from a handful of people, maybe they're a sleeper agent, maybe they're siding with Nick. We don't know which key figures that they could be impersonating. Now it's 1 million.
That's 1 million. It's a population the size of Jacksonville, Florida's worth of Skrulls walking around on Earth.
Brisbane.
And they're all living in Jacksonville, having come from there. I know.
Oh, that makes sense. Okay, sure.
Or San Jose. There's a lot of 1 million cities that are about Philadelphia's size of Skrulls walking around.
There are people right now watching in Jacksonville thanks for the shout out. All right.
How does he know?
Just from a character point of view as well, I really love that we're fleshing out Nick Fury, someone who has been around since 2008, but is but not one-dimensional, but he's been very focus-driven, mission-driven. And
secretive,
we know him as
guarded.
Exactly. So the fact that he's having these incredibly human moments, talking about his history, talking about his family, it's like we're kind of relearning that he is a human with flaws, that he is, imperfect, but he has a long, extensive history that's not just saving the world all the time.
It's his experience as a black man in the United States and a citizen of the world. It's similar to his conversation with Steve Rogers in the lift going down.
The gun in the bag,
Soldier.
right?
We're talking about his grandfather, I think it was, or was it like his uncle or something? But a gun in the bag. He didn't trust people. That kind of notion. And the fact that, I keep calling him Mendo, but Ben Mendelsohn's character in this, Talos, he tells Fury, I believe that Skrulls and humans can coexist. And Fury goes, no, we cannot. Trust me, I grew up in Alabama. The human race has too much prejudice for this idea to work, which is so heartbreaking. But I understand his perspective. I understand Mendo's point of view, but I also understand, you got to listen to Sam Jackson. He might be onto something here.
Lived experience here.
Yes.
But I also think because in this first episode, it was really drilled that Nick hasn't been the same since the blip. I think this is adding insult to injury, where the blip happened and so many people were eradicated for sort of 4 years. And that Thanos' whole perspective was overpopulation will kill planets. And now 1 million of another species is coming to Earth when the threat was this overpopulation. So it's Nick was the result of Thanos' ideologies. And now it's that's kind of being absolutely disrupted by this invasion that's happening on the DL.
Yeah.
So I thought that was really interesting.
I think Nick feels overwhelmed. Like, I think he was comfortable with the idea of Skrulls existing on Earth if he knew everyone who was on that list. But now he realizes, there's what started as just 14 Dalmatian puppies. It's now 101 Dalmatians. He can't handle all that. But
I don't think Talos was wrong at all, because it's like, what would you have done in that situation?
I know.
No,
he's
right.
always going to put his people first.
And he's telling them,
come to
Earth. Secret, come to Earth.
Word is gospel here. You gave us your word. Like, this is going to happen whether you are here or not. We're going to see it through.
Also, to be fair too, I think I heard some Skrulls say Talos, and then I've heard other people say Talos. Like, if there's a Y in there.
Moscow.
Yep. It's also Namor. Like, there's different pronunciations. It's Han, Solo. It's okay.
It's AT and Walker. It's okay.
I think he just okay. Yeah.
So Fury and Talos part ways as Fury heads to London to answer Maria Hill's mother, Elizabeth, for Hill's death.
Also a devastating scene.
Such a good scene.
You could tell it hurt Nick. He's normally such a stoic character. When she said, "You're the reason I'm taking my daughter home in a box," he was like that hit him hard.
Don't let it be for nothing, Great scene. We get to watch some news coverage of the bombing in Moscow, including some sound bites from the NATO Secretary General, the UK Prime Minister, and FXN news host, played by Christopher McDonald, Shooter McGavin. Great Canadian character actor. I'm glad to see this guy show up again and again. Perfectly cast in the show.
Yes.
Of course, they're all revealed to be Skrulls. And we see this meeting of the Skrull Council. Another great moment, like how Nick Fury just has the worst opinion of humanity. It's just intolerance and prejudice is in our DNA. We see how Gravik kind of puts them on blast in this scene for saying, this is your idea of the best of humanity is to destroy the environment and to wage war on each other, lock each other up in cages. Like, in some ways it lets humanity off the hook for the past 20 years if you have, like, Skrulls have been our world leaders doing this. But I think he's just saying, like, you have descended to the worst of humanity by trying to assimilate into them. Rather than using this opportunity to lift up humanity, you just fall into their depths.
As soon as he started saying, "I prefer dogs," I was like, hold up, let him cook.
101 Dalmatians.
He's right. He's about to drop some truth bombs. That's right. Dogs are better people than people.
100%. But it goes into this conversation again, is the longer you become a human, do you start sort of like living and breathing human ideologies? And if you've got Nick Fury saying, whoa, people don't get along. Like, this has been going on for centuries, millennia. It's in a human DNA. And now it's like, you must be in your shell for a long time. And it's like, we're seeing the good and bad sides of humanity that the Skrulls are now experiencing for their first time in a way as well.
I'm hoping that just like the Captain America, the Winter Soldier movie revealed that Hydra had infiltrated S.H.I.E.L.D., Hydra being Nazis. And I think that sort of like, it's a great comic book storytelling trope that, we've been infiltrated by this evil organization and that's why things in the world are bad. I think it let us off the hook a little bit, and I'm hoping that this show doesn't fully do that, but at least speaks to there have been some instigators in recent human history. Turns out they're Skrulls, and that's why things are as bad as they are. But I hope that the story uses that as a metaphor to just really talk about how crappy some people in our real world can be, and they're kind of like Skrull-ish instigators and what they're putting out there, and kind of
Well, I mean, I see this storyline in a very different lens in a way as well, because it's like, I don't know if you've noticed this, but none of the Skrulls are American. They're British or they're Australian.
Or Canadian.
Or Canadian, that's it. And I think that, I am technically a legal alien. So,
welcome.
Like, it's a boop on the nose for me here. But it is sort of like really interesting to see that side of it integrating into a different, country, or in this case, planet. And I don't know. I just think that there's a very different feel for me personally watching this.
And at the center of the story, you have a very American actor, Samuel L. Jackson. You know what I mean? He's interacting with these other characters, but then also Don Cheadle, an American actor, American character, that kind of perspective. And it's very interesting to see them. Oh, and we've taken out one of the Americans, Maria Hill, out. Off of the playing board. Everett Ross, an American character.
We didn't talk about the emotional impact that this has had. How was that for you? Because I didn't feel as much, mainly because it wasn't on a big screen in like a movie sense. It was the end of an episode.
And at the end of the episode, I don't know about you two, but I also felt like maybe she's going to pull through in the next one. No, then she died. That hit me.
Or has she already been replicated somewhere?
I think she's gone. I think the only Skrull who replicated her was Soren. And I think by taking Soren off the table, I think that was the implication.
Yeah. But to your point, Maude, I felt more of the emotional impact with Maria Hill's mother.
I did too.
Yeah.
And and it's because I love these characters. I love the comic book characters of Maria Hill and Nick Fury. I love the MCU characters, but both of the characters, Fury and Hill, we haven't spent that much time with them. They've always been sort of supporting characters in the larger storylines. So she's also been very mysterious and stoic, and we don't know that much about Maria. Yeah. So to have her mom show up and have Nick Fury know her mom, that is where the emotion is. I'm like, oh, these are real people.
And there's accountability for the first time.
Love it.
A lot of, it's like, 2,000 people died in the bomb.
Yeah.
But they're faceless, nameless.
It was like when Alfre Woodard's character confronted Tony Stark in Captain America: Civil War. Accountability. My son died in Sokovia. He was over there volunteering. He died in Sokovia. What about my son, Mr. Stark? And then that made him do his whole thing. So it's an interesting parallel to have Fury have to deal with that.
I'm really glad you brought up that perspective as an Australian, Maude, because I think absolutely that is intentional to the show and the casting and the fact that of the people on that Skrull Council, we don't have President Ritson. President Ritson is the American president, and I think the show already is making some interesting points on what it means to be human. And you can look at this from a lot of different perspectives, but to be human is to be flawed. Yep. To be human is to be paranoid, to be jumpy, to be trigger happy.
To have love.
And to be weak, but also to love. And I hope by the end of this season, we will learn some of the positive aspects of being human and how that can positively impact the Skrulls.
What Marvel Comics have been doing since the dawn of age.
Right. There you go.
And I do love the Skrull Council meeting. We see the weakness of these Skrull leaders, how quickly they're able to fold just by Gravik making a strong case.
Yeah.
And they basically, they do the Palpatine.
Total unchecked power.
Yeah.
Which, in other terms, is unlimited power.
Yep.
That's never gone well. Has never gone well. But I think that, when all of those leaders who have immense power, NATO, Prime Minister, they are superseding their power to one person who we have seen is very sadistic. The way he's been toying with Nick Fury. That is a dangerous person to have unlimited, unchecked power.
We're in a scary spot now, right? But one council member, Shirley's dissents, quickly informs Talos about what happened during this meeting. And Gravik returns to, basically as a hero to New Skrulls. So they're like, great, finally, we're making a move. They applaud him. Gaia eavesdrops on the conversation with the scientist, Rosa Dalton and Pagan. They're harvesting DNA. We find out a little bit later in the episode what exactly they're doing because she runs a search on the scientist, finds that a report detailing the DNA that she has. We see Groot, a frost beast, which not like a frost giant, a frost beast. Okay. Colobsidian and Extremis. Yeah. We'll get more into what exactly is going on.
Put a pin in that.
Put a pin in it. We'll come back to it.
Oh, okay, yeah, cool.
Meanwhile, I think my favorite part of this episode is just the roadie scenes.
Oh my God, so good.
So good.
Attends this emergency security summit in London, attempting to de-escalate the Moscow situation, threatens to carpet bomb Slovakia.
Well, there was a bit of attitude happening there.
I don't know if he was joking to his aide or whatever. Like he joked about, he's like, I'm going to put on the suit and cover. Like he didn't threaten Slovakia to their face.
If they don't have a sense of humor, that's on them.
Yeah.
I think it's just interesting. Like he's probably thinking, you're barely a member of the UN or NATO, right? But I understand.
This is a great scene because Don Cheadle as Rhodey, he has so much sort of dignity and he's not letting himself get walked all over these other folks, but he's still
very America.
It was such an American scene, right?
But it was like
the president doesn't even have to be here,
right? But it was still technically with everything he was saying, it was still very polite.
Yeah.
It was still very diplomatic, but it was still listen, don't F with me. Don't tell me that this is what's happening. And I almost expected him to say, I know Nicholas J. Fury. He's a friend of mine. I know Maria Hill. But he didn't do that, probably for political reasons. But he still basically laid down the law in a way that was very America, but it was very respectful to the world stage. It almost reminded me a bit of Black Panther Wakanda Forever when Queen Ramonda comes in and she addresses the US and France and they're talking shit on Wakanda and she lays it down we have lost our king, but we have not lost the ability to defend ourselves. That was a fantastic
I think
scene.
it's interesting that they sent not Secretary of State Richard Schiff, they sent War Machine into this count. Like, I think that was a diplomatic move by President Ritson.
Yep.
Like, we could send the Secretary of State the diplomat, but no, we saw how Raimondo walked all over him.
Isn't that so funny that he's now like, he what is he, Secretary of Defense, Secretary of State?
We're not really sure what
his role is.
He might be like UN, or he might be UN ambassador. He could be the national security advisor or something like that.
But it's funny that Rhodey gets these assignments, and I'm sure other countries are like, who are they sending? War Machine?
Damn, a guy named War Machine?
But I also love the fact that we're seeing Rhodey in a different suit. And this suit is just as powerful. And I think that's a really...
In some ways more powerful.
Yeah.
I mean, Don Cheadle was great to watch in the scene, but I think my favorite scene in this episode we're talking is this restaurant scene with Fury and Rhodey. Yes. We learned that Rhodey has actually known about Skrulls for 15 years, that he was part of some like for your eyes only thing, and they didn't think it was real. He's still in denial a little bit. He's in denial. He just thought it was like...
He thinks it's small scale.
He thought it was small scale.
If we back that up a little bit, 15 years from when this story takes place, which we established is either 2025 or 2026, we're going back to like, what is that, 2010?
Yeah,
right?
It would have been. Yeah.
So it would have been probably after the events of the first Iron Man movie, where he's Terrence Howard, but maybe around the same time of the events of the second Iron Man movie, or maybe a little bit before, 2010.
So
Iron
this
Man
is when
2.
they're just starting to learn
about the large. But so like this Rhodey, if you go back and watch Iron Man 2, rewatch that and know he knows about aliens.
Yeah,
it's crazy.
It's also interesting to think about how Fury knew, but kept this from the rest of the U.S. military establishment.
And I think that this is what's important here, where information is so crucial. But because we're dealing in a political sense, this stuff is classified.
Right.
You know, like huge life-changing events, huge bits of information. It's classified. And then you still have a luxury to even choose whether you believe this information and the extent of it as well.
So they bring up maybe calling the Avengers, but Fury says they cannot do that, which is, some clever writing here because he says if you bring the Avengers into this, they could get duplicated. I think it's just a smart move.
It just takes it to the end.
It's one of the best. Yeah, because some of these other things they say like, oh, well, I don't want to bother the Avengers with that. I'm like, well,
that's
how big of a threat
job.
This is? That is their job to handle all other threats. I thought this was a great line. Yeah. But in general, the writing of the scene, Rhodey says,
the reason we wrestled this power from mediocre men who don't look like us was not simply to turn around and hand it to mediocre men who do.
Such a great line. It's just to have these two men talking to each other and how like the way it turns on it where Rhodey just says the reason why we're here is that I'm here to fire you.
And I think it's really important as well where it's like Fury's looking to him as an ally. You need to help me. We are in this
at the
together.
Avenger level, at the military level, but also at the we're both black men.
Oh yeah.
We both have this shared experience of both black men in the military and having to, come up in the world that we've come up in. And Rhodey is in a way offended at that.
Well, it's because of that I have
to be exceptional and hold you accountable. And I'm coming here as a courtesy. I'm letting you know you're out. And then Fury replies with,
even when I'm out, I'm in.
Such a baller line. So like just like
the perfect button.
They're mic dropping each other in this scene. It's a wonderful episode where the plot for the first and second episodes are it's very intriguing. Yeah. But I think the highlight for the show has been the writing and the acting.
Yeah.
And
episode 2, I think, was a step up for me. I enjoyed episode 1, but it was a slow burn. This one, I was like, oh, I understand what the show is.
The choreography is amazing as well. I mean, I can get into that when it matters. But I also, like, when you're looking at fights here, like, there are great physical fights, but there are really, really great emotional and word fights as well.
Yes. Word fights.
So Olivia Colman, we haven't even talked about her yet this episode, how great she is. Her character, Sonia Fallsworth, meets up with the Russian mafia at a butcher shop. And her line about...
pay grade.
And tell me here, what does it tell you about me indoors? Like just so great. And they're interrogating the Skrull bomb courier in this walk-in freezer. She cuts off his finger to confirm that he is a Skrull.
Effortless. And this is like, we're getting reminded again that violence is going to be a big part of this show. Like we are changing genres here. This isn't a fun little superhero thing with explosions. This is, I'm going to take out a torture device and chop your finger off.
Yeah, I don't think Captain America would ever do that. No. It's crazy.
She injects him with the serum to bring his blood temperature up to 160 degrees Celsius.
Now, this is something that I thought was interesting because in episode 1, you said we don't really have something that will take out the Skrulls. Is this a liquid that only works on Skrulls?
Oh, something with their DNA?
And so, like, they can start putting it in.
Something that would also kill a person, but maybe a Skrull is a little bit more resistant to it.
Because they're resistant to radiation, right?
Yeah.
Heat is a form of radiation.
And we know that Skrulls can die by just bullet wounds, the way that a human. They're not bulletproof. Like they are. I wouldn't say Skrulls are invulnerable. They're like more enhanced than a human with their physical abilities and capabilities, but not like superpowered.
Well, we know they have DNA from extremist patients. Could this be associated with that? Part of the same technology they were able to derive from Aldrich Killian's AIM operation.
Could be.
We can talk about that more, but the Skrull reveals Gravik's plan to use alien and modified DNA to make the Skrulls stronger. So...
It wouldn't be Marvel if we're not making a super soldier.
Right. And it seems confirmed now we're talking about Super Skrulls. Like, their variant on taking, like, a Weapon X type of operation.
Yeah.
But...
So what do we know about the alien DNA that they have on board already? Groot.
Extremist, Frost Beast.
Do we want to get into that right now? Do we want to talk about it?
We can talk about that more. I want to get through the rest of the episode, though. Gravik's team has infiltrated this butcher shop, taking out the Russian mafia. It's absolutely brutal.
Anytime
you got hooks, meat hooks. It reminds me of Goodfellas.
Okay.
Yeah.
It's Chainsaw Massacre.
But I love the fact that, you've got humans and Skrulls going up against each other. We kind of saw it with Maria Hill last time, but it's like, that seemed a little bit more on par. Now it's just like, this is where Skrulls outshine. And I love what they're doing with choreography, with what does like a more super strength look like.
Yes.
Fighting against a normal person. And we get that with obviously the superheroes.
Yes.
There's something about this that I really enjoyed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it was fun. And that is essentially what the Skrulls are doing with the fracking pods. They're just keeping people on meat hooks and storage freezers, right?
Yeah.
Well, during this, Gaia slips out of the car and makes a phone call in Russian. And Sonya leaves the interrogation freezer via an escape hatch. Gravik extracts the tortured Skrull. As they drive past their safe house, they get a police swarming. It's, he actually did. Yeah, and perhaps, does he know? And perhaps this was the guy, that might have been Gaia's phone call.
I think so.
Possibly, or was it the information that she got from the interrogation? We don't really know, but they park in a forest, and then we get, an Adriana Sopranos thing where,
Wait, well, are we home already? Nearly.
Leave the gun, take the cannoli. They shot that dude out in the woods.
You only told lies, though.
What happens to the human who's in the fracking pod? Do we not release that guy back to his...
I think he's still alive, and they might go back and just kill him. Or they're going to have another Skrull take over that Americans against Russians guy, right? They could do that.
So you can never really die. This is the nerd effect again. No one ever really dies.
So the old Fury may have had his eyes open everywhere, but today's Fury has cars everywhere. Fury takes a Range Rover into the countryside, and we see a Skrull woman preparing food in a nice kitchen. I like that she's chopping up green cucumbers in this thing.
Violence.
Green on
Just
green
like
violence.
The green finger.
They were fingers. Yeah.
The UN ambassador had a big green...
That's right. They wear their green flare. It's like in Return to Oz. That's how Dorothy knew which people were the ones if they were greenstones. Scary movie that traumatized me. It was directed by one of the best all-time editors of Hollywood. Anyway, he wrote the best book on editing. So anyway, Fury enters the house. Some Otis Redding music plays. Try a little bit of tenderness. Rounds the corner, though. She's no longer a Skrull. She's turned back into his wife, Priscilla Fury. She asks him if she's forgetting something. He puts on his wedding ring. They kiss. What a great smooch, right? And we fade to black. But I brought this question. You guys think I'm crazy, but does Nick Fury know that his wife is a Skrull?
When you become intimate with a person, and I mean intimate, when you know them
to your mate
inside and out, if you catch my drift, you're gonna know that they're a Skrull.
I mean,
Skrulls make love differently than humans. That's all I'm trying to say.
How do you know this? Where's the evidence? How many Skrulls? Oh,
I'm kidding.
I think it's. I think
and
you're
the
right.
lovemaking was different.
Yeah. They said it.
That's You see someone's true self at that moment, but I do think that there is
their weird alien penis.
There were some lines right where he said he knows what a sexy Skrull looks like. He's like, right. We talked about this.
Wait, what? With good look. Yeah, when he's talking to Mendo, and he's like,
I'm considered
ugly ass Skrull or something. He goes, I'm considered good looking where I'm from, and he's like, no, you're not.
Right. I think so. There were some lines where it sounds like Nick Fury has but to me, I think Nick Fury's outrage in that moment that there were 1 million Skrulls on Earth. I think if his wife was a Skrull, he'd be less outraged by that. I think that might have.
That's a good point.
That is a really great point. But I have to point out that as far as my reading of it is, unless I'm mistaken, I believe that the character who is Nick Fury's wife was the Skrull who was present in the flashback in 1997, who brought in Gravik, the young kid.
She had a different name, Vera, right?
Oh, okay.
But that might have been her Skrull name, and now she has the name of Priscilla.
Priscilla is the human
name. And that just is her human name. But my thing is, if you are a Skrull, why would you put on this human form when Fury walks in? Doesn't that feel kind of... It feels like Mad Men, Betty Draper, I'm going to put on my nice dress for you when you walk in, Don, from your busy day at work. Why not present your true self in your home skin,
What about if she was a human to keep up appearances for a second because he comes in and she's testing to make sure that it's her husband Fury and not a Skrull.
Oh, and he says, "Aren't you forgetting something?"
Right,
When
and it's
that
like
was
that's
a
almost
test.
like the test, and then
It's
he
kind of
goes and does the thing that he knows he has to go and do.
I would believe that if in that moment he put on his wedding ring, then she reverted back to Skrull form, and then they kiss.
I just think it cheapens Nick Fury as a character to have something this close under his nose be like
Potentially.
You're right.
Potentially.
Or it reveals more of his flaws, that he had someone under his nose this whole time that he didn't.
that is just not the same anymore.
It's just not.
and
I don't know.
Cracks are showing.
But I don't think he would be that outraged. I think that her revealing that to him would be something that would make him be more comfortable with the idea of there being a million Skrulls.
I also think this is why he's dying on this hill. I think he does know, and this is why.
Dying on that hill, right?
Maria Hill.
Sorry,
Too soon.
but the fact that this is really personal for him. Like, he's vouching for the Skrulls, not because it's someone that they've been working with for 30 years, not because he's made allies out of them, but because he's in deep. This is a personal thing for him now. And
He
I think
loves
it's
a
because
Skrull, and he, you know,
Yeah.
And I think.
But you're right. He did just say we cannot integrate in this level, in this way.
I know.
It
Right.
won't happen. But which
That's,
one is
I mean,
it,
that was
guys?
such a powerful moment. I think that statement, while true, I think it's going to be the antithesis of this series. That Nick Fury, through his relationship with his wife, is going to prove that human beings aren't instinctively intolerant, that we're instinctively embracing.
It's not a mistake, probably, that I'm also thinking of Men in Black again.
Yep.
Right,
That
Tommy Lee Jones.
That great scene where he's talking to Agent J and he tells him, like, you know, a person is smart, but people are dumb. So that might be Nick Fury's perspective too, is that humanity as a whole can't do this, but I can be married to a Skrull and live happily with this beautiful woman, and we can live here on Earth.
Yeah.
But a million Skrulls and being public and you guys walking around and having to do,
It's also a control issue. He had things under control because it was in a regulated sort of way that he approved. And now that this has happened without his approval and he can't contain it, and it's like it's bigger than him now.
Yep.
Yeah. I thought it was such a sweet. I mean, Men in Black. I think we all have to rewatch Men in Black.
Great.
One of the best written movies of the past 30 years.
Have you done that on the deep dive yet? Have you done that?
I think we got to get to
Do the whole series, because I have big problems
just
with
the
Men in
first
Black
one.
3. I have big problems with Men in Black 3. It's everyone's second favorite, but no, I don't think the time travel in that makes sense.
Okay, before we continue, we want to thank some people who helped us make this episode and really give you guys the way that you can support us the best by grabbing something from nerdriot.shop. We just got our Skrull designs from nerdriot.shop. This is an Invasion is Here design where you have a classic Marvel character with their Skrull identity that they're sharing the face with. We also have another design, totally not a Skrull. You can get these over at nerdriot.shop.
I want that one.
This one is something that is specific to the Deep Dive collection. We have our little Vosmonaut, is what we call him.
That's like your last name.
It is like my last name. But yeah, these Skrull designs are really great. I'm going to be wearing these all the time to celebrate Secret Invasion. But yeah, it's really the best way to support us at New Rockstars Network. Everything we're trying to do. Nerdriot.shop, all kinds of great designs, hoodies, shirts, mugs. You can get a Dusty No mug. So please grab one of those over at nerdriot.shop. But let's get back into our discussion, folks. Okay. What do we think is going on with Rhodey? Do we think he was bullshitting when he said he was just a human who got glimpses of the Skrulls, or do we think Rhodey might be a Skrull himself?
Both make sense.
Yeah.
And that's what's really hard about this entire concept.
Yeah. I don't know.
He's trying to, ice Nick Fury out. He's trying to take, and he's well within his right to do so. But I think you've got to look at people who are controlling situations, and anyone who's not a Skrull, they're on the out, and he's just sort of stepping up to kind of take charge of things. The fact that he was downplaying sort of like the fact that there are aliens, he's like, yeah, but are there?
Right, yeah.
Right.
That makes me think that he
decoy,
is. Yeah.
Isn't it?
And I think it's also interesting to know that last time we saw Rhodey was the Falcon and the Winter Soldier, which I think by the way, Don Cheadle was nominated for an Emmy for that, and I think even he was surprised. He's like, I'm surprised too, guys. I'm barely in the show, but he was great.
I mean, so far he's done better work on Secret Invasion than he has in that.
Fantastic. But in that series, it looked like he had, if not the same, a similar position politically to what he has now. Like he was kind of rising in the ranks, whatever that was. Before Falcon and the Winter Soldier, in the story months before, 8 to 9 months or something before that, was Endgame, where he was an Avenger. And he had been an Avenger for the 5 years while a bunch of other Avengers were dusted. But he and another group of Avengers were still alive. So in that time, I feel like he was acting mostly as War Machine and less like a political, figure. So for him to all of a sudden post Endgame be more of a Secretary of State or Secretary of Defense or somebody very important in the White House working with the President of the United States makes you go, did a Skrull replace him and then start to rise the ranks? Or was he replaced once he got that job, but a Skrull wasn't interested in Rhodey because it's like, why would a Skrull want to be War Machine other than being in the Avengers when you could be War Machine, who's also the Secretary of Defense? Like, that might be more tantalizing.
He's actually taking the seat instead of the president.
Correct.
At the NATO.
Correct.
So he's like, this is the thing.
If it's not him, it's probably the president, Ritson. We've talked about that, right? If
he's not the Skrull, it could be President Ritson. He'd be at the table. He'd be at the table in the council.
See, I think the highest ranking Skrull in the MCU is Val. I think the CIA director is a Skrull. And I think everyone else above her is a human who's just kind of naive about it, at least in the U.S. establishment. Because you're right. I think if Ritson he would have been in that room.
Yep.
Wow, you make a good point. Well, then why wasn't Rhodey in the room? Obviously, they didn't want to spoil it for us watching the show.
I mean, if Rhodey is a Skrull, they're going to have to explain what faction he's in. Because he's not on Team Fury. Right. He's playing his own game.
What happened in Marvel Comics is that anytime they revealed a character was a Skrull, there would usually be comics to then flashback and explain when they were replaced.
Yeah.
Why and when. When was Hank Pym taken over as a Skrull in the comics? And
you get to go, that makes sense now.
Yeah, so from that point into this point, so you can then go back and look at those comic books where it's just Hank Pym walking around, you go, that's a Skrull.
So Rhodey is post-War Machine, sort of like full-time and now more Politico.
If he's a Skrull, my take is that it happened then. Not that Rhodey has been a Skrull since 2010. You see what I'm saying? I think it's been Rhodey all the way up and through at least Endgame.
Yep, I agree.
And then post that, we'll see.
I think the timeline would have to be more recent. I really hope that they reveal Hank Pym. I know after Quantumania, I don't know how many of those actors are going to come back.
Sure.
But if somehow they can establish that the way he was able to get this sentient AI tech, isn't there something with those little green helmets he puts on ants and the same thing that they're doing with humans and their memory tech and then kind of...
you think Hank Pym designed the way that they use the fracking pods?
Could be.
If this were the Marvel Comics and that they actually had some real continuity and some real geniuses at the helm and building out this franchise as opposed to just
Marvel Comics
outsourcing it to great directors who don't know or care about building a franchise of interconnectivity. Because it's impossible to do that. It's so hard to do that.
Let him rant.
Yeah, let him cook.
You're right. Marvel Comics doesn't have that either. But there was an era in the early 2000s when you had Warren Ellis, when you had Brian Michael Bendis, and some of the with the Civil War comics, with the Secret Invasion comics, were able to do some truly great crossover events. And we haven't had that in the MCU since the Russos were doing it. But even the Russos, when you asked them, they didn't know what they were doing. Marcus and McFeely were just kind of flying by their seat of the pants.
Yeah.
They were in one of these rooms on the Disney lot with dry erase boards, and they just got lucky with which magnets they threw on the board, and it just worked out.
And that's why they pay him the big bucks.
Yeah. Hey, speaking of which, let's talk about this DNA. They got they got Cull Obsidian, they got Extremis, they got not a Frost Giant, they got a Frost Beast, which tells you they really took the C-level MCU elements and just kind of put them back in the mix now because who gives a fuck about Groot's DNA right now or Cull Obsidian or Extremis? They put them in the background of Shang-Chi. Extremis, who gives a fuck?
Hang on a minute.
A lot of things.
Yeah.
Like when you think about it,
I'm sorry, I'm cooking.
Regrows. A regeneration.
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
That's
and
exactly
when you
right.
look at them like Extremis, it sounds like, do you know Extremis from the comic books?
A little bit.
Is he a heat kind of dude?
A little bit.
Cool. And then you go to Frost, something.
Yeah.
And then you've got, this is Elemental.
It is Elemental.
Yes.
Holy crap.
In the comic books, the Super Skrull, who it looks like this is what the show is eventually going to sort of introduce. The Super Skrull originally was genetically engineered to copy the powers of the Fantastic Four. Elemental. You had the Human Torch. You had the liquid moving Mr. Fantastic, the Invisible Woman who was air, the Thing who was rock. So maybe there are, because the Fantastic Four don't exist in the MCU yet, we can see the gears turning. Since the FF don't exist yet, you've got Cull Obsidian maybe taking the place of sort of like the Thing with that kind of durability and that big
Groot is Reed Richards, the stretchy
a little bit of that.
Yep.
The Extremis is maybe a little bit of the Human Torch thing, and the Frost Giant, cold air. I'm not entirely sure.
That one doesn't line up as well.
No, but still, I like what Maud's saying about this sort of elemental aspect to these things, and I would say that another reason that they might have picked these specific little pieces of MCU lore to pull DNA from is because they are a little bit obscure. Because maybe the Skrulls, at whatever levels of international governments they're located in could get access to this stuff. And it's maybe easier to get a little piece of Groot sample than it would be to get like Bruce Banner's DNA sample. You know what I'm saying?
Easy to control as well. Like,
potentially.
You know,
And we got to think, so with Cull Obsidian, it was probably his hand. When it got severed by Wong's portal.
That's where they got that.
Scraps of when Groot tried to strangle Thanos in Wakanda. There might have been some branches that fell to the ground.
Sheds.
Meet my friend Tree. I am Groot. I am Steve Rogers. Yeah, there's little pieces of Groot everywhere.
Yeah.
Extremists, there was some rogue. There was that one fighting in the fighting club in Shang-Chi.
Yep.
Where did they get Frost Beast DNA?
I know.
Yeah.
The end of Thor: The Dark World featured
That's
a big.
why I don't know.
There we go.
Oh, some portals. The portals
Featured a big
opened up?
portal fight, and one of the giant frost beasts came through, and they even followed up with it. I think is a mid-credits or post-credits scene at the end of Thor: The Dark World, where the big frost beast was running through like London somewhere, where they filmed the movie. Then the very next week, in 2013, on ABC TV. You saw an episode of Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. where they're almost like picking up the pieces, like Coulson and his team were picking up the pieces of this thing. They were dealing with an entirely different Asgardian storyline as well, but they were acknowledging the fact that this whole mess just happened in London. We're kind of picking up the pieces. And I think they even maybe showed the Frost Beast kind of running around, almost as though S.H.I.E.L.D. had to like round him up, round up the animal.
So, Skrull in Shang-Chi and in S.H.I.E.L.D. confirmed.
Was there a Skrull in Shang-Chi?
Well, you're saying that that's what Extremis was in?
That they must have.
No, there was in that cage match fighting arena.
There was an extremist guy. There was a Black Widow
There was
agent.
a Black Widow, and there was also Abomination fighting Wong. So that whole little fight club just had a bunch of different MCU style fighters. One of those being an extremist soldier from 2013, and even Agents of S.H.I.E.L.D. used like some extremist DNA.
So they're 100% in S.H.I.E.L.D.
Absolutely.
Oh,
if they're not in S.H.I.E.L.D., they're probably
or whatever
in
is left of S.H.I.E.L.D. They're in S.W.O.R.D. now, probably.
We've said, Nick Fury has known Skrulls since 1995. Like, he probably put some in S.H.I.E.L.D. So they were able to get, the same way Hydra was infiltrated, they were able to get access to some of that stuff that way.
I like that. Okay, let's talk about the Kree-Skrull war that's happening right now. It was alluded to here that there was people who died in that war, that war is still waging it, that they've lost every battle they fought in that war.
They're not learning their lesson.
They're really not, because they peace is the way forward. Just try to resettle and move on. So does this prove that what we were talking about last week, that Saber might be the U.S. putting their stations around the galaxy so that they can have a stake in this war and then keep Earth and whoever their allies are defended?
Well, they sent out a signal, right? Yeah. And everyone answered who wasn't a Kree captive. And there is absolutely no way that the Kree do not know that the majority of the Skrull are on Earth.
You think?
100%.
Oh my God. In the comic books, Earth is like the most important planet in the entire, not just galaxy, universe. It's pretty ridiculous. Like, they keep coming up in every new comic book storyline for an excuse as to why Earth is so pivotal, this little ball of mud, why it's so important to all the other alien races that are way more advanced, way more technologically.
You don't see the other version of that, where America is the most important country in the entire Earth?
Of course I do.
Cool.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yes, that comes through. You mean American exceptionalism in comic books? Yes, happens all the time. But what's fun is that what Maude just brought up, that could be the excuse in the MCU. Why is Earth even involved in the Kree-Skrull War? It becomes a staging ground because all of the Skrulls are there. So we might get that payoff in the Marvels. We might get the payoff in a later film, maybe something like a future Avengers movie down the line or something. I don't know.
And I think these preemptive measures that Fury has been taking to protect Earth is how he's going to get back in from being fired or whatever. He's going to be like, I've been protecting you. You haven't even seen the greater threat. You're so consumed with what's happening here that you don't know what's happening there.
Like maybe President Ritson is going to like award Nick Fury a medal and reinstate him after the events of this show.
There is something going on in the MCU, and I'm sure it's just probably incidental, but they keep
there's
establishing...
a giant damn creature in the Pacific Ocean we haven't talked about yet. He's got his hands sticking out.
And they keep, in the Guardians movies, they keep establishing that Earth culture is weirdly popular in other places, the band that does like American rock music when they discover guitars on Nowhere. They all seem to love Earth music and Earth culture. And so I think maybe there is something to the fact that Earth was the one country that defied a celestial regeneration process. And that we bear this scar, this big mole on our cheek in the form of Tiamat poking out of the Indian Ocean. I think that it's given Earth a lot of respect around the galaxy. Like, wow, we've heard of celestials popping planets. You guys somehow stopped that process. Hector, what comic do you want to recommend this week?
Really quickly, I'm so glad that I have this comic book because we were asking some great questions while watching this show. And Maude was asking about the sort of limitations of what happens when a Skrull really does replace a human. What does that mean? What does that entail? I want to recommend this great comic book. This is a tie-in kind of to Secret Invasion. Technically takes place before the Secret Invasion comic. And this is Captain Marvel. Now, this is a male on the cover here, not a woman. It's a boring guy. But this is the original Captain Marvel in the comic books, a guy named Mar-Vell. He's a Kree superhero. Good guy, okay? I know we think Kree are bad, but this guy's a good guy. And in this storyline, I'm just going to spoil it because it's so good. A Skrull takes over the life of this character, Kree Captain Marvel. He had been dead for years, so when he all of a sudden comes back, people are like, oh, you're back to life. It's secretly a Skrull sleeper agent. Because he took over the life of this superhero, who's a very heroic man. By the end of this little story, the Skrull decides to be a good guy and a hero. And you really get to see the impact of what does it mean when a Skrull takes over. So highly recommend Captain Marvel. I'm going to try to look for some more stuff that we saw from episode 2 and the episodes later on as we keep watching this season to try to find some great comic book examples of the discussions that we're having. But I think that this is a great, great, great example of actually getting into the nitty gritty, a person taking over a hero.
A hero.
What does that mean? Can't wait for Maude to read it.
Yay!
I love it. Thank you for recommending that, Hector.
Yeah.
And yes, absolutely. Everyone, read a comic book. You'll appreciate these shows even more. You'll have more opinions about them. I'll tell you that.
That's true.
Let's talk about the Skrull Council. How is the council formed? Are there democratic selections? Do electors nominate them? Is it a rotating co-op? How does this really work?
This is long game stuff for sure. They are picking people who have obviously positions of power, but it's their own sect. But I think how the councils come about is almost redundant if they can all shirk their power to one person. Mm-hmm. If they can just say, we've got a general right now. The council in itself has become obsolete.
Useless.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But I mean, how it came about, I mean, I think it's really interesting to know that in previous scenes where you see the Madam Prime Minister talking, when you see NATO and they're coming to a head and they're all actually in on it behind the scenes.
Yeah.
That's scary. I also want to know what are the implications of constantly leaving Gaia out of these conversations.
Right. She wasn't allowed to enter the room. I think that's going to make her feel like she's an Aaron Burr, she's not in the room where it happens, and that's going to be a wedge between her and Gravik eventually. Gravik could have made an excuse for her and said, no, she comes with me.
Yep.
She needs to be in the room
she's
too.
She's my protege. Yeah, she's important.
Yeah,
and it's also right now still leaving her in a place where that character could be redemptive, like you mentioned before, Eric, because she's not fully a part of these decisions that the Skrull Council is making that are the very extreme and horrific decisions that they're making. So that later in the show, I think that she's going to be like, wait, no, I didn't know that that's what you guys were doing. I don't agree with that.
Yeah. I think we have the Skrull Council. They are not behind this international plot of that Gravik has been orchestrating of different terrorist cells attacking countries and getting countries to attack each other. Gotcha. And I think that shows that they're out of the loop because what Prescott referred to was an architect. I don't think he talked about a shadow council. He talked about one person who has been organizing this. That person's Gravik.
Yeah, you're
and
right.
I think the shadow council, the fact that they're not behind that, like that just shows like they had an opportunity to make some real moves. And instead, they're just sinking into their positions and getting these cushy jobs and just doing what humans would normally do in those jobs anyway. I
also think it's really important to note that the one who didn't yield and didn't nominate the power over to the general, to Gravik,
Shirley,
was able to stay alive.
I thought she was going to die for sure.
100%.
Yeah. I was like, oh, she's about to get shot in the head.
Yes, and I think it's really important to note that they are still unifying over the fact that they are Skrulls at the end. I mean, at the end of the day.
Kind of like Skrulls don't kill Skrulls.
And that's what happened in episode 1 with Talos. It's like, hey, I said I had it. You didn't have to kill him. Like, please, can we stop killing all the Skrulls, even if we disagree?
But then
she calls straight away.
But then didn't Talos in episode 1 kill the Ross Skrull? Wasn't that Talos that did it? Right? Because Talos was chasing him and then shot him, and then because the Ross Skrull had the information that he was going to go back to. Like, there's just so much.
And it said you're one of them.
Yeah.
And so that's the thing. It's like, are they going to start killing their own if they don't sort of, subscribe to this extremist notion? But I did think that was interesting that she was able to veto and say, no, I don't agree with any of this. And they went, great, you can actually leave and we won't harm
For
you.
now. I think give it a couple episodes. There's going to be like a Godfather, Michael Corleone moment where everyone who's on that council is just going to get executed.
I agree. Also, the question I just thought of is...
I don't agree. Because they're already in those positions. They've targeted like government,
right. So
media.
Here's my question I just thought of. If the Skrulls were already in this position, the Shadow Council were already in these human roles in these positions, and they were already starting to do this antagonistic Russia versus the United States plan. So it looked like the Shadow Council did have the same plan as the rest of the Skrull refugee camp and Gravik. It's just that we're saying Gravik was much more extreme.
Yes.
Were the Shadow Council members of the Skrull human infiltrators, were they having those positions for a different plan, a different reason? Question. No. If they were at one point planning to publicly reveal themselves as Skrulls to the populace of Earth, would those high-level positions of human leadership that we know, would they then be like, no, yeah, it's okay, we can trust Skrulls, like the Prime Minister, that guy on Fox News? Like, was that their plan, to kind of peacefully coexist? But Gravik is like, no, we need to do this. But then again, why would the Shadow Council be okay with Russia versus the U.S.?
I think tensions versus war. I think a Cold War is what they wanted. They wanted a return to like Cold War era tensions where you have proxy wars like the Ukraine invasion, like the annexation of Crimea and all these other things, but not open warfare where we're firing dirty bombs and nukes at each other.
But why would they be okay with Cold War for their survival of their Skrull people on Earth? Do you see what I'm saying? What would the end game be?
I think it's
don't they want the nukes and the radiation that will kill off the humans and the Skrulls can actually take over?
I think it helps to have these radioactive sites, but I think really it just kind of helps to further the geopolitical balance. To have these countries that are tense with each other, it helps drive up the capitalistic forces, to have an arms race, the military-industrial complex, to have arms dealers who are building weapons. I think they benefit from the old era Stark enterprises that's building missiles. And I think that's what Gravik was accusing them of, is you're just like playing into the classic playbook of just of a constant Orwellian, we're always at war with each other, but not really. You have trade wars and proxy fights. I think that's kind of been the playbook of American history in the 21st century. He just wants to have one dirty war that wipes out all humans so they can inherit that Earth.
Could be.
And they recognize that and they say, okay, we can't really control you anymore, so you're in charge.
It wasn't even that. Madam Prime Minister was just like, absolutely agree. Like, he's been in her ear. She's like, let's go. I vote.
Shirley call it. She's like, you're in on this. You got, and you know.
She's like, well, let me finish speaking and I'll tell you why this argument is so good. And you're like, you should smooch too.
I think things are going to get real dirty in the weeks ahead. I think at some point we know there's going to be an attack on the presidential motorcade based off of trailer footage. I think at some point this is going to come out in the open. It's going to spill out, and I think humans are going to be aware of the Skrull threat. And I mean, that's what happened in Secret Invasion. Times Square has screens where Stephen Colbert and Barack Obama and John McCain turn into Skrulls. And I think it's just a matter of time before that happens.
It is so interesting that this is all happening before the full X-Men have been introduced in this world. Because for many years now, comic book fans, people on the internet have been complaining, well, if the Avengers are accepted by humanity, how could the X-Men be rejected just because they're mutants? True. Yeah, you're right. Racism doesn't make sense. You're correct. Racism is illogical. It just comes down to that's what that is. But to add on to that, they could, in the MCU, say, well, after humans learn that Skrulls have become this dangerous secret threat, and they become very public, it's going to make all of humanity very much more prejudiced, much more likely to, oh wait, now there's human beings that are being born with powers and they're going to take over. They're eventually going to make us obsolete, Homo superior. Not on my watch. I don't like mutants anymore. So maybe that could factor into.
We have to deal
X-Men.
with Skrulls, but we draw the line at X-Men. Is that kind of thing? Also, is this genetic DNA of superpowers being tested on Skrulls? Is that walking so that X-Men can run? Is this
maybe, or maybe it's just what they're giving us because they can't give us X-Men yet. So this is like,
or they can't give us Fantastic Four yet. Yeah, I don't know. It's very
Fantastic Four's around the corner, surely.
Absolutely. Look, Monica Rambeau maybe went through like a cosmic ray membrane to get her powers, right? She talked about that vehicle that was designed by a designer. We still don't know what engineer that was. It's probably Reed Richards. We are now on a
Saber. Friend who worked for the Air Force, right?
Yeah, no, it could be Reed Richards.
We've got
Hank Pym, could be. We've got a Saber Station. We could get some Fantastic Four astronauts there, and then they get their powers that way. And we've already established that Kamala Khan, who's going to be in the Marvels, is a mutant, basically. She's like kind of our first unnamed named mutant character. Then we had Namor in Black Panther Wakanda Forever. He said he was a mutant. He outright said it. So how this is all going to eventually factor into the MCU's version of the mutants, either before or after Deadpool 3 wraps up the X-Men Fox Mutants storyline with Hugh Jackman and Ryan Reynolds, we'll see.
Yeah, I think we've had so many opportunities for Marvel to define what makes someone a mutant. And they haven't specified it yet. It's like Namor had this weird process where his mother consumed the heart-shaped herb while he was in the womb. But like being in the womb and having things affect you, it's not a genetic process. Your genetics come from your parents and what you inherit at the moment of conception and how that forms your DNA. So this would have been well after that. So I don't know. I think the MCU is pulling their punches right now, and they're not there yet. And there may be legal issues, or maybe just the fact that some legacy producers are still attached to any project that will have X-Men in the title, and they're waiting for some kind of time to expire. Could be one of those legacy producers is not a very good person. Brian Singer, and they have to pay him out if they do any X-Men movie right now. They don't want to do that. So I don't know. There's lots of reasons why it could be the case, but we don't have the answers right now.
Not yet. Only episode 2.
Only episode 2. We'll find out in episode 3. Shirley! Hey, this has been a delight chatting about this series with you guys. It's so much fun. We'll leave it there for this episode of Inside Marvel. Remember, subscribe to all 3 channels, The Breakroom, the main New Rockstars channel, Deep Dive. We're talking about all kinds of stuff and doing some great analysis across all channels. But yeah, future episodes of Inside Marvel, this Aftershow, will be here on The Breakroom. And be sure to check out the live watch-along that comes out early in the morning if you're one of us who watches then. You can follow me at EA Voss, follow Maude at Maude Garrett, follow Hector at Hector is Funny. Subscribe to Inside Marvel wherever you get your podcasts. Please grab something from nerdride.shop to support us that way, and we thank you for watching. We'll see you next week, all you Skrulls.